And that is going to take so much. There's from the ventilation systems to, you know, what it takes to keep her, a 5-year-old, diligent about keeping her mask on. So much. It is not, it's not going to be easy. But some things that I hope the board and the school community can help keep as little COVID as possible. I had sent to Jessica, and hopefully she can forward these to you. I did not bother to print out 100 pages for 10 of you on my little home printer again.
We did get it, so thank you.
One of the studies actually backed up a book that was done on the political situation that led to closing schools in the first place. So the study that I sent out showed the epicenter of how kids drive transmission in the community. And the reason kids drive transmission in the community is because their hygiene and their personal boundaries are very non-existent. They lay on each other, they hug each other, they literally breathe in your face if they can, and then they come home and do that to you. And so they're just little vectors of disease, as cute as they are, right? And so that is how the Bush and Obama administration, whenever they developed these pandemic teams, they started studying kids and their behavior, and they started studying outbreaks of different diseases. And the reason they had recommended initially these school closures is for this reason, because of human behavior. We have a problem with virus behavior, and we have a problem with human behavior. And it's specifically in our case, if we're looking at children and reducing transmission in schools, the way they behave. So ventilation is a huge thing, because you can train them, you can try to get them to wear masks. And there was a bunch of pictures from the raffle this time, and a lot of the pictures are from last year, and they have everyone wearing their masks. And then you could see that a lot of the pictures, they were wearing their masks properly, but not always, right? They slide, to get perfect mask wearing is very hard. And then to have respirators as opposed to just that, there's a whole layer of masking to do it right and to get everyone to comply at all times to make masks really work really well. So even though I have my kiddo in an N95 and we take her out to eat her lunch every day and get her back in, so she never has her mask off indoors. And it's a Herculean effort. My supervisors, my husband's supervisors, my mother-in-law, this is a whole thing. It's a dedicated, and so I know what it is for our family, and I know what it must be for the school to try to also be that, to layer any diligence. That's hard. Ventilation is expensive, but it's easy. So that's essentially the research that I'll continue to bring. Will be, thinking in terms of how can we raise money? What can we do to update these systems, to make sure all the HEPA filters are, in every classroom, to make sure they're sufficient for the square footage, to make sure they don't have other environmental problems that they can introduce into the system, because that's one of the things that the Children's Mercy study mentioned, and then I spoke with Luke, who does the Children's Mercy evaluations. He's concerned that if you just have families buying any air filter that's marketed on the market, that you get one with something that can degrade over time, and it works great at first, and it improves air quality, and then it actually introduces a negative for air quality as it deteriorates. So what he and I spoke about was HEPA only. Square footage matters, that you're making sure you're hitting the square footage, and that you're trying to find products that are affordable, and that parents, donations, however that's going to happen for all those classrooms, that the filters can be replaced on the 6-month rotation that's generally necessary for these products. Right. I look forward to hearing more about the follow-up on the study. I have reviewed it once, but I had questions about the methodology. And then, so that's one of the asks that I had last time, to see the study and to see what it did. So I very much appreciate that. And so another one is covered outdoor spaces, so that more of the seasonal, there can be more outdoor activities during more seasons. Again, the outdoors is already ventilated, so that's good.
And we're gonna have to wrap up in just a sec.
Okay,
Sorry.
hold on. And then CO2 monitors. And so that's something I'm following up with Luke on, because if teachers can have these little monitors and they have this number that says, oh, if someone has COVID in here, it's a bad deal because the CO2 is high. So it's, okay, I need to open the window. We need to take a break and take a walk out, and let the air filter do its thing. So that is sort of the next thing that I'm following up with Luke Children's Mercy with, and that I am doing more research on, and we'll try to come back next month for. And I'm sure I got more than 3 minutes out of you, but thank you so much.
But we appreciate your concern, and we definitely care a lot about the safety of our kids, and we'll continue to sort of think about how do we do that well in this very new world that we live in.
Yeah.
So
Wonderful.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Yes. I know Brandy is not able to be here today, so I will forward you. She had just some quick updates about sort of events going on with dances and Boot Bayou, but I'll forward that to the board. So we need a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
So moved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, so we are going to start with the governance committee report. I think the most important piece is, you all will remember, we did our strategic planning over the summer, and out of that, I shared the draft objectives that came from Kent's team based on the many discussions we had over the summer. And since that time, Eliman and his team have talked about sort of what were those draft objectives and what recommendations do they have. They sort of looked at what they believe is doable for a plan. This plan would be 2023 through 28. So Mr. Mbeng, do you want to sort of talk through the revisions that your team recommended?
Yeah, we had a meeting. We have not reviewed everything. We were planning to do some next week to finalize it. We reviewed and we were trying to see what matters most and what can be measurable. Number one. Number two, what is realistic based on where we are now. For instance, if you're talking about closing achievement gap, what we see is where we are now in math and math science and English language. And if you're progressing by 5% every year, where should we be in 5 years? So instead of 80%, we are more realistic to talk about 75%, even though our goal is to get to 100%. And we know also that the more you move forward, there may be some accelerators as you put in place all the action items, action plan. But that's what we thought. So it's the same for closing the achievement gap. Instead of 10% annually, it's not an even how do you say, progressions, because the first 2 years might be slower as you put in place whatever strategy we have, and then the last two might be much quicker. So that's why we put on average 10% annually, and 50% is almost the same. So that's why we put 50% by 2028 as opposed to 10%. And then to align it to the number 4 too, the 50% that we already have at number 4. Now for the graduation rate, we look at the top district. I mean, I look at Blue Valley, they're at 97.5. I know we're our high school team is doing everything to get to where they need to get. I would put 95% as opposed to 100% because I think that there are factors that we don't, how do you say it, control. Kids dropping out, knowing that we're taking some kids who come with significant gaps that our high school teams are really working hard to help.
So your recommendation on number 3 is
95
instead of 100%?
Missouri is at 87% something, I think.
Right.
And I would love to hear also Gwen's experience with that would be helpful. But I know it's 5 years from now, probably our goal is to have 100% ready for career plan too. But I'm saying again, if there's some factors we don't control, but the closer we get to 100%, the better it would be.
Questions or thoughts from board members regarding sort of the 4 outcomes and the recommended revisions from the buildings?
And one more thing also about the 75%, by the way. If you look at the last few years pre-pandemic, and you look at the top 10 performing school district based on the MAP tests, and we have been always for each subject in the past. Each of the subject, whether it's math, science, or English language art, Académie Lafayette have been in the top 10 of each of them. If you aggregate everything, we would be the top 5. So if you get to 75%, you very likely you'll be the top 1 or 2 at least. Yeah.
All right. If there's no questions or thoughts, we can go on to goal number 2.
So the teacher quality retention, yeah, we already discussed it at 85% annually. This has been what we had also with UCM. The number 2 we don't think is realistic because of having French-speaking teacher 10% per year. It is for lofty goal, not realistic at all. I think what we need to try to do is properly serve those kids who have special needs. And the school have done tremendous efforts since over the last 10 years. When we had 750 kids, we only had one person and a half. That's what we had at the time. And a paraprofessional for Title I. Now we have 2 paraprofessionals per building, and we have almost 2 special ed per building, and speech, we have 1 per building at least. So I think the school had made a lot of efforts in properly staffing, but finding 10% every year, we don't think is realistic.
Will there be a rewritten goal then here?
Yeah, yes, probably yes. So this one, the number 3 would be based probably on the survey. 85% of teachers indicate they have proper educational resources. That will be based on the survey, provided that we make sure the survey there is something like that. So what we know is already 100% of our teachers have a budget of $700 a year, which is not typical for a school district. When I talk to people here, even at this conference, they're all surprised. But we will need to see how to articulate and make sure that our teachers have the adequate resources and support they need, especially training and mentoring. I think we could say adequate resources, but also for new teachers, adequate mentoring every year. So teachers' pay is starting to be a reality for us. As we said, we only had two teachers, I think, who officially said that they left because of the pay. For what I know. However, we have had real issues recruiting new teachers because others paid more competitive salaries. So it's a problem of attracting some of the teachers. If you take off this year, music teacher was really difficult, and other subject too was difficult to get them because as people paid more. And there's no possibility for the head of school to negotiate based on our needs, because we have a salary matrix and we've lost some good candidates because the money our salary is not there. So I don't know how we can articulate it without bankrupting our school, because we'll need a couple of years. Maybe if you put by 2028, hopefully we should be able to be at the same level of the average level of the surrounding district, maybe.
And I think to that point, I mean, our goal is to have the key objectives that we need and identify what those are moving forward. And then what is the gap in finances, right? We recognize that the finances we have today will not get us to these strategic objectives, but that has to be a part of the conversation that the board has, is if this is what we say is most important, how do we identifying the funding needed in order to get there? So I think that's part of the next conversation once we finalize these objectives.
Yeah, it's extremely important. I said, even for recruiting teachers, we would love to have to offer H1B as opposed to J1, because J1 has a lot of issues of having to go back home, and transforming them into a green card is a problem as opposed to H1B. And it comes down to the level of salary and experience. So I think that working with the finance department and see how does it look like for our projection and where we should be would be helpful to make sure that we continue to increase the salaries. We have done it at least 3 times over the last 5 years.
And then for the last point there, number 5.
The last point didn't make sense, because 90% of teachers will demonstrate competency in school classroom management, effective instructional annually. How would you measure it, of demonstrated? So I'm thinking of the better is be effective or distinguished, because we have 4 levels of evaluation for teachers. The 4 levels, the first one is the one who is on probation and supporting, and then the one who is ineffective, first one, and then the one that is effective teacher and distinguished teacher. So getting based on the annual evaluation of educators evaluation, getting to 90% of our teachers effective and or distinguished. So that's what we thought might make sense, and this should be an objective that we need to continue to work on, so that we can translate what we want really for to develop, support, and retain highly effective teachers.
Any questions or other feedback on recommended revisions to these?
So I think there's one of those missing. I don't see it here. Maybe it not translated. So it's about making sure that 90% of the teachers we're recruiting have at least 3 years and the proper certification. That's something that we thought about adding also as an objective. Remember that as charter school, we have up to 20% of our teachers that may not be licensed is allowed, but because of the shortage of teachers, we're trying to transform some of those teachers. Few of the teachers were not licensed to go through the licensing process. But yeah, that's one of the objectives proposed by the by the principals. About 90% of newly hired teachers at least have 3 years of experience and the proper certification.
Got it. So yeah, we would want to add that in. And I think there's enough outstanding questions that I think we will discuss these today. I don't know that we'll be able to vote on them because I think there's still a little bit of lack of clarity that we need to sort of, based on any questions or issues that people raised today, finalize this, resend it out, but it probably does not. We need to do sort of another pass before we could, I imagine, feel comfortable as a board sort of voting on what is our strategic plan moving forward. So I would definitely add that piece that you mentioned. I mean, I'll share, and I know that your buildings haven't had a chance to review goal 3 and 4 yet. I'll share sort of my perspective. And do we have Alexandra on as well? I can't see participants. Okay. So you'll see under school culture, my perspective is this is one of the most important things that we're going to need to figure out for our strategic plan, but we don't have the right tool. I think we all recognized in our discussion over the summer that the panorama survey was a good start, but there were still a lot of questions that we weren't really sure how to answer with the survey tool we currently use. So what SLU is going to help us with, and has already started the process, one, reviewing the panorama survey to figure out, can we utilize it in a different way to actually access the information we need, or if not, how they would be willing to sort of help us create a new tool based on what is research say we should be looking at. So that's why you see number 1, it just says 1 to 2 new indicators based on our conversation with SLU. Our recommendation is we don't hold off on approving the strategic plan until we have those, because we want the buildings to be able to move forward developing a plan as to how to meet these objectives. That will still be blank even when we look at this next month to vote on, but we will start to get closer to what's the tool we're going to use to effectively measure, do all of our families, students, teachers feel like they belong, feel supported, feel sort of a part of the AL community. So that will be an outstanding piece. My perception on number 2 is there are obstacles and challenges that exist for families when we talk about wanting equal representation in volunteering for the school and attending meetings. There are barriers that particularly our families who are impacted by poverty face. So just because they're not at a parent meeting doesn't mean they're a part of the school. So I think instead of that number 2, it should come from the survey tool as to, do they feel a part of the community? And then the other recommendation that I wanted sort of Mr. Mbengu and your teams to think about, the implementation of restorative justice, I think is a fabulous process, but it's not an objective. That's part of the strategy that you all would utilize to get to an effective culture, but not an objective that the board would look at, essentially, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the question probably we all need to ask is, what matters most, what makes the difference, and what should we be looking at to make sure we're where we need to be? Because some of the objectives are more of an action plan than objective, really. Now, coming back to number 1, DESI released proposed a climate school culture and climate survey. We will be looking into that too, to adopt it, and it's part of the indicators for MSIP6. Remember that Académie Lafayette is part of cohort number 1 for MSIP6, and we will be evaluated before other districts. And again, it's not mandatory to adopt the survey proposed by DESI, but we will look into that and see whether or not it serves better our need.
And so it's not a requirement to use their survey; it's a requirement to survey based on culture, and they provide.
And climate.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Got it. Any other thoughts, questions about culture? Because I do think it's one of the most critical things for us to figure out. All right, then on the final one, I think we will all remember that how we have stated our goal of being a diverse community is to mirror the Kansas City public school boundary, that data is impossible to find. And I thought we had somebody that could sort of help us better access that data. We do not. It is not accessible. It is very difficult to get. We were able to find something, I think, from 2013, but it is so complicated to get. I think as a board, we instead need to decide if we get to sort of 50% students of color and 50% white, is that our definition of success, regardless of what the KCPS boundaries demographics are? Because we can't get that data. It is not available. So I am curious what other board members think. Is there any concern if we just had a more clearly defined goal there than mirroring the KCPS boundaries?
Yeah, this one also is based on the projection we made. Remember in 2018, we came up with a spreadsheet to see if we do this, how many applications from minorities can we get to be able to influence kindergarten first and so on, because our school, we can only influence one grade at a time. It is kindergarten, first grade, and ninth grade. Those are the two grades that we have entry points. So the projection I shared with you, the 13 or 15 years projection, shows us where we should be in the next 5 years. So I think this goal of 50% is more realistic. It doesn't mean we're going to stop there. Once we get to 2028, probably we'll see, assess the situation and move forward. If we go beyond that, that's fine, of course. But at this point, based on the projection we made and the number of kids, we will be working hard to get the 50% minority is more realistic than getting to more than that.
I think we can get that data.
If we can get that data, would you like to see it be the KCPS boundary?
We can find it. The census has it all. They take out certain jurisdictions that aren't. I think we can find it.
Is it good by zip code?
I'm looking now, but I think they would think so. ACS has a lot of down in like neighborhoods.
So if we can access it, is it more important that we mirror that, or is it more important to have a crystal clear, like this is our goal?
Well, I think the data would inform the goal, right? So I think we kind of need both.
Yeah.
And the census data lags a little bit.
It does. We're never going to have like up-to-date data, but best we can do.
Realizing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So yeah, let's figure out. So far, I couldn't find anybody that has that data, but apparently I wasn't asking the right people. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
It's a little difficult to hear the other conversation happening in the room. So if someone can just sort of repeat briefly what was just said by the others, that would be helpful.
Yes, sorry about that. Because I forgot, you have to, anytime you want to talk, you have to unmute, and I would mute. So we have a complicated sound system today, but Michael was just saying he thinks that it is possible to get that data, so it would be important to know what that data is as an initial benchmark, and we can use that to benchmark against. So I think we're going to continue doing some digging, and then we'll look to provide additional details to the board and vote on it in November.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions or concerns from anybody online? All right, then we will continue digging into those, and I think I'm excited to have a new strategic plan that we can start to sort of measure against moving forward. So appreciate everybody's time and effort in putting together a great plan. Next, I know we needed to vote on the new restraint policy. Mr. Mbang, can you share a little overview about why we need an updated policy?
Yeah, because it's something that Desi sent. I think we expected to do it in December of last year. It was sent why they see that we need to do something like that. And probably Dana may have more information about that change. We had one, but it was very old, dated back to 2010 or 2012. And there's a requirement for school district to adopt a restraining and seclusion policy.
Dana, anything else you would add?
No, just we need to update it. The language is different. There are things that are in there and the old one that just don't even, it's not even things that people discuss. So we just need an update.
And we have a copy that everybody should have seen in the folder. So we need a motion to approve the.
This is Gwen Poss. I make a motion to approve the updated seclusion and restraint policy.
Awesome.
I second.
Any discussion? All right.
I second.
Thank you. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you all. All right, over to you.
All right. So just want to start with accounts payable for September, and in the finance packet, you should have received the accounts payable. And then I also highlighted some of the transactions that occurred during September. I just wanted to highlight those again, just 3 of them. First item is the McGraw-Hill. We had some textbooks that we purchased for high school that came in about $21,000, $22,000. Next item that we talked about during finance was Nathan Clark. He's our IT consultant. We had the majority of that was labor costs that we paid him during September, and that was $23,000. And the majority of that is the installation for 3rd and 4th floor renovations at Armour. So he helped with that. And then he has some other just various IT help that he did during his September billing. And then the third one I wanted to talk about was Gallagher. And I mentioned this last month. And so we paid that up front, the full amount here at the beginning of the year, $134,000. But one thing I don't know if I mentioned last month was it did come in over what we expected by $13,000. So we're over budget on that item, but we did avoid finance fees of about $5,000. So a little bit of a positive there. Those are all the items that we discussed for September's accounts payable. Were there any questions as you went through those transactions? Michael, would you make a motion on September?
I move to approve September accounts payable.
Do we have a second?
Second, Michelle.
Any discussion? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. I don't know what that sounded.
Next item, so the August set of financial statements. So just to kind of reiterate what I mentioned last month, and that is revenues and expenses tend to break even towards January. So these first few months, we're gonna be spending more than we receive. And so for August, the compiled set of financial statements, during August, we spent more than we received by $134,000. And if you look at it cumulatively, we spent $245,000 more than we received. If you throw the Armour renovations in there, we've actually spent $500,000 more than we've received. So we're about $500,000 more than what we've received year to date so far. We did talk about variances in our finance meeting on Thursday, and we just talked about that we want to closely watch 3 categories, 3 buckets: teaching resources, other improvement of instruction, and admin tech expenses. They're over budget right now, and so I want to keep an eye on those, just make sure they don't get out of control. We also talked about summer school and some initial variances, but we've scheduled follow-up on that. So I'm looking to report to the board on that next month. The final expenditures report, that's a report that's submitted in September for the previous year, so 21-22 school year. We submit that to DESE in September. And so because of that report, we're actually going to receive $326,000. And we were only expecting $163,000, so about double what we were looking at. So that's kind of a positive there.
What caused the difference?
The way we budgeted school-wide pool. And so we were just looking at the title funds that are inside that pool, and we weren't taking into account the other expenses that are all pulled into school-wide. Good question. Next item, the debt refinance. So I wanted to give an update on Central Bank's debt refinance. And so Peter, he's been helping us with that debt restructure refinance. And he reached out to me at the end of September, middle to end of September, and he said that their board voted and approved our refinance of debt and an additional loan for capital improvements. And so that Central Bank note will refinance their existing debt at 5%, and then the additional note and the IFF note that they'll refinance is going to be at 5.5%, is what he's told me. I haven't seen that on paper yet, so that's always subject to change until you sign something. But just wanted to give you that good news there. Also, he's trying to work in that offer that on the capital projects debt that they're going to give us a loan for, it'll be interest only for the first year once we draw down, is what he's trying to work into that. Where they're at on it is Peter was working on loan commitments. He still hasn't gotten those to us yet, so I'm expecting those either this week or next week. And then they're working on the appraisals for Cherry and Oak. Jeff and I met with the appraiser on September 30th to walk him around those two buildings. And so it was a 4-week process from September 23rd. And when we met with him on the 30th, he was saying he was about 3 weeks out. But the banks do like to look at those appraisals before everything's finalized. So we're probably still 3 weeks out on that.
So that would be all capital improvements for Cherry and Oak?
No, so we submitted to the bank a capital needs spreadsheet, and that consisted of about $2 million. And it covers all 3 campuses. And there's items that are on there that have been identified. Any other questions on that? Okay, also just within those capital projects, we talked about the Cherry Playground. And right now with our approved budget, we don't have anything in there for the playground, but it is an item of concern. But with that approved loan from Central Bank, we've allocated or identified $15,000 for the removal of that Cherry Playground and then replacement of $60,000. We just can't move forward until those funds are available with the executed loan. And it is a matter of safety that we're concerned about with that Cherry Playground because they have concrete footers that are exposed. I did ask Jeff just for a quick update on that, and they've temporarily secured rubber fall surfaces to those concrete piers to make it safe for the students. So we are aware of that, and we just want to make sure the students are safe. And then we also talked about just some initial brainstorming on a capital campaign and its strategy. And we had some also problem-solving discussion about extracurricular activities and the budget assigned there. And before we go on to transportation, just one quick comment too about the DESE inequity funding. We reached out to Tammy Lehman just on a timing for that, but it's still uncertain on when that will happen this year, because they should have the funding this year, this school year, 22-23. However, they're not sure on the timing of that. We've been given some indication that it may happen by January this year, or the beginning of next year, January 2023. But there's still some uncertainty about how DESE can roll that out. So just a quick update on that. And then just with transportation, I just wanted to highlight some negotiations and the insurance where we're at on that. So we offered to buy buses from Citywide. They had identified buses they had for sale. We offered 75% of what they were asking. They came back at a different amount, $70,000, and that comes out to about a 20% discount. So we accepted. So we had some savings there. So that was really good. We were excited about that. So we own 7 buses, 3 small buses, those are 22 passenger vehicles. At least that's what the passengers were going to put in those buses. And then 4 big buses, 44 passenger vehicles. So we have 7 buses that we purchased. And so we also reached out to get a quote from our insurance company on the insurance for those vehicles. They bound us at $300 more than what they quoted us for, and that was $10,623. That could potentially go up based on the drivers we hire. And so it's based on the driving record, just like all of our insurances, driving insurance or auto insurances. So just to give you a heads up that we may have to pay a little bit more just based on driving records. We also applied for fleet gas cards, and we've been approved for those. And that's going to be just for fuel purchases only. You can set it to also include maintenance, but I've locked it down to just fuel purchases. I think that's the most wise thing to do with those currently. And then last item I want to talk about, First Student got with us a new discounted rate. They initially, when we signed the contract in July, they had us at $354 per route per day. And so now they've given us a discount down to $222 per route per day based on the tiering they're doing with the other schools. We still haven't received an invoice, so that's what they've told us, but we know their promises and how they've spoken. So
and it's strict. I mean, have they indicated why we haven't gotten an invoice for anything yet? What that's about?
Well, because we hadn't agreed to the 222.
Got it.
Any questions on, I know I went through those fairly quickly, but any questions on any of those items I covered?
Just that, I mean, now that we have buses that we can soon begin using, I know you mentioned thinking about after school and funding for after school, making sure we have the funding and transportation, right? Can utilize the buses to make sure we have equitable access to our after school. Would love us to just sort of think about how we make that happen, how we
so Jeff, when I've talked to Jeff about that, he's really been adamant about, let's make sure this is a good pilot program for the Armor. Right. And of course, that is something that we want to do is after school. But right now, we definitely want to get the wheels running, yes, rolling for the Armor pilot. But it has been a discussion point, and we do want to be to that point. We just don't know when. We don't have a time.
Yes, I get that we have to do step one. We just need to get kids to school every day on time and get them home. And from the notes on transportation, it seems like everything, the whole plan that you laid out for the board, everything is moving along smoothly. There haven't been any hiccups. It's all, I mean, it takes time to sort of finalize all those, but it seems like it's all moving along.
Yes, we are moving. Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Do we know like how much of a hit we've taken on attendance yet for?
I do not have those figures, no.
Just see kind of where it all balances out.
And the question was how much of a hit we took on attendance, recognizing our students are not getting here as much as we would like them to. So, any other questions or thoughts on finance or transportation? All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mbang.
The District Performance Committee met and we discussed the demographic and the free and reduced that I produced here. As you can see, can you move forward? The committee wanted to see longitudinal data and see at least the last 5 years how we're doing, how we're progressing, and also the challenges we're facing, plus what measures we're taking to make sure that we can address those challenges. Can you move down, please? Okay. Is the first one? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the free and reduced lunch. I received the data from Anna, who is in charge of our core data at this point. That's the toughest one to improve, because our strategic plan, what we wanted was to make sure that we get to 30% at least for K2 students. We're not there yet, because you don't know how to target free and reduced anyway. They have no color or no zone because they're everywhere. But it was hard to get to where we wanted, to 30%. So we have a very small progress at 23% this coming year. As you see, that's the progress we have from 2018 to 2023. So the next one is race and ethnicity. This is for this year. This year has been, the last 2 years with the pandemic have been extremely difficult to target some zip codes. The reasons are the following. Number one, we did not do tour anymore. We did not do a physical tour. The second, we did not have a French-speaking preschool teacher in some low-income zip codes and some preschools. We didn't have our recruiters. We used to have 2 recruiters going into certain zip codes and recruiting. So basically what we had was open the school, people who were interested to apply. That's not enough. We were not able to be aggressive. So as you see, the minorities is around 42%, which is a little bit less than what we projected to get. If you can see for the next one, we built a 13 years demographic projection based on the efforts we were making, combination of the 3 efforts. The line, so I see we're progressing, but again, this year we were we went backward from 57%, now we're 57.83. And our projected percentage of minority was supposed to be 43.12, we had 42.17. But for the other years, previous years, we reached our target. So what we need to do to make sure that it's not going to be a trend, but make sure we continue to make those efforts and make sure that we get to the 50-50 we want to be in by 2028. If anybody has questions, please feel free to interrupt. Yeah, as I said, we were not able to put in place a strategy we adopted the last 5 years. So we will be working on recruiting and retaining at least one qualified preschool teacher. Christy is working really hard to get that. We were thinking of having at least somebody who will be working from 8 o'clock to 12 to serve those 3 preschools. So it has been extremely difficult to find somebody. We even thought about hiring somebody from outside, I mean, from abroad with J1, but we don't think that the sponsors will accept that. So we are now, we are limited to finding somebody in Kansas City to help with preschool programs. And also we are working on recruiting 2 people with giving them Chromebooks. They'll be targeting some zip codes and helping parents, prospective parents, filling out the applications and going to some neighborhood events and so on, which we did not do the last 2 years. So also working with K-1 teachers and parents to see how to better support them, educate them, because sometimes we're losing kids between 1st grade and 2nd grade because parents, some of them are afraid that the kids are not reading at the desired grade level, and they're afraid because they can't help their kids. I think it will help retaining more minority kids in between kindergarten and 1st grade. 1st grade and 2nd grade, sorry. And having a marketing campaign also, Chrissy is developing a marketing campaign and a budget that we will be adopting. It's something we've done in past years, continue to do that, and targeting minority radios and websites. Also outreach to leaders in the minority community. In the past, I visited some minority churches and discussed with the pastors about our schools to make sure that they understand that we have a diverse, we're working on a diverse, inclusive, and equitable school community so that they can be a voice of support. And also continue to train our teachers on and educate them on how to educate diverse learners. We're working with Co-Action Collective, and a lot of good things are happening now with our teachers and our parents, making sure we develop a very effective partnership with our families. Any question about these measures or any other thoughts that might be done to improve things?
Alamain, thanks for the data and really appreciate the bullet points on the strategies you're going to implement or continue.
Thanks. You're welcome. So any question, concern about the data?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm working on a dashboard with the change in our different student support information system has been extremely difficult, but I'm trying to do a longitudinal data for all the things we're looking at so that whenever we need it, and it may be accessible to the board members, we can look at how we're doing in different areas, and also the leadership to be able to, for grant and reporting purposes. It will take some time, but hopefully by December we'll have something reliable for the last at least 5 years, how we're doing on different areas. Staff recognitions for Cherry, we have Mustafa Ould-Amer, who's from Algeria, Christina Guerrero from France, and Yao Markel from Ivory Coast, West Africa, for representing our school and their countries at the Trinity Methodist Church for World Communion Sunday on October 2nd. What a great example of the richness of our school culture. Bravo. And Oak recognition, all my gratitude to the long-term subs who have been playing an important role to allow us to open the school and run some classes while we were still working to have our teachers from abroad. As you know, this year was extremely challenging for all these teachers stuck abroad. Fortunately, everybody's here except for one. Merci to Madame Kautar Ben Elmas Luhia, 5th grade. Madame Onej Besong from 3rd grade. Madame Nilofar Nasimi, kindergarten. And Madame Veronica King, 4th grade. Bravo. And for armor, we're recognizing J.J. Harper, who is a highly efficient new building manager. So Armor's first time having a building manager on site and have been extremely helpful with many things. Bravo. Academic, is Katie here? Katie,
yes, I'm here.
Good. So I think you can inform the board about all the things we're doing here.
Sure. So hopefully you've had a bit of an opportunity to look over the our newly revised. They're not brand new policies. They've been revised policies based upon just the changes that have come about as a result of opening our high school. And so what these policies are they kind of define the culture of our IB programs. And so IB has every school, when they become authorized, develop these policies that explain how the school is going to address the program standards and practices. So these were all initially developed under Jessica McDowell when she was the IB coordinator, and when we became authorized with the MYP program. And so these would have been originally written in 2017, and I'm not sure how often they were reviewed up until the point where I took over. But since I've been the MYP coordinator and the diploma program coordinator, I've been working to update these policies to reflect what's happening in our school, and then also just the ways in which IB has changed over time, and their expectations and how they outline what they want has changed a bit. So over the course of, it's actually been more than a year, almost 2 years since I've been working on these, because there's lots of little things that have to be reviewed. So when we went through authorization of our diploma program last winter, that was the first time that IB took a look at them. And at that point, they were looking at how because we hadn't been authorized yet. So they didn't have to be approved by the board at that time, but they were looking at what our plan was for the diploma program and how adding the years 4 and 5, so 9th and 10th grade, to our middle years program, how we planned as a school to improve our policies to meet all of those changes and the changes within our student body and so forth. So you won't see a lot of change other than some additions in each of these policies. And I can just kind of roughly outline for you in each of these 5 policies what's different than what the board would have approved prior. In the language policy, the big change was that once students enter 9th grade, we're no longer a French immersion school. However, it outlines how we still celebrate our French language learning. And what's different now is that we offer an introduction to French for our incoming 9th graders and 10th graders and so forth as they are learning French for the first time. Also changes, like we also at the high school have worked to develop courses, not language acquisition necessarily, but just language courses to meet the students' needs if they speak Spanish at home. So offering a heritage Spanish class so that our students who can continue to develop that language in a more academic way if they hadn't had that opportunity before. And then also, outlining or celebrating the fact that we now will be able to offer a bilingual diploma to our high school graduates who choose to do the full IB program. Also noting our seal of biliteracy, those kinds of things in the language policy. The inclusion policy didn't have many changes. I mean, none of these had drastic changes, first of all, as I was mentioning, but what you'll see that's different is how a thing that makes our school different than a lot of other IB schools that have diploma programs is that we do not have a requirement as far as who can participate in the diploma program. We're preparing all of our students to join and participate in the diploma program if they choose to at the level that they they choose to. Everyone in some way is participating, but also all of our students at our school are automatically NYP students, even students who maybe didn't weren't part of our NYP program in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So that was added to the policy, as well as ways in which we plan to support and how we currently are supporting our students who didn't come from that background, didn't have that French background. So what do we do as a high school to make sure that all of those students are included in how we go about, participating in the network of IB schools? So those were some things that were added to the inclusion policy. Assessment policy, again, the changes were adding the diploma program, although very similar in a lot of ways. The diploma program, one of the driving factors of the diploma program is the assessments that our students will be taking that are administered and assessed by IB rather than just the teachers in the classrooms. And so developing a policy for how we'll go about, giving those exams, but also monitoring them and providing our students with the instruction that's needed to be prepared for those. The admissions policy changed due to the high school, the fact that we now have a lottery at the high school also, that there is no French language requirement in admissions, and that that students do not have to have an IB background. So that was an addition. And then lastly, to our academic integrity policy, we've just updated it for it to be more relevant with the times. For one, they wanted to see how we planned to lead our students through instructional practices that would teach them how to avoid plagiarism, and then also outline how we plan to monitor our students' written work or even just orally produced work. And so we purchased a plagiarism detection software, and now our high school teachers are using it on a regular basis to make sure that our students understand how to avoid it. And when not, they learn when we do detect it, that students learn how to make changes so that they know how to stay within the academic integrity policy. It also outlines the steps that the teachers make, the student expectation, and then what happens if there was an academic dishonesty issue. So all of these things are really updated to also represent the high school. We felt like it made the most sense to do them together rather than two separate policies. It just makes us a more tightly connected team of teachers and a more tightly connected school. So we've worked on these with different teachers, helped me develop these, and different administrators and just different people within our school community. And then our building leadership team this August we all broke them down and reviewed them and make sure they were in line with the way things were working. And now our next step is to bring it to the board. And this should be moving forward, our ongoing policy or process, that if any kind of change that must take place, any kind of change we need to make to any of these policies, we then will, at this time of year, at the beginning of the school year, present them to the board for approval once again. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Katie? And I'll just say I really appreciate all of the work you put into making both the MYP and the DP program successful. I particularly like our philosophy on inclusion, that it's for all students, because I know that is not necessarily always the case at IB programs. And I know that that's no small undertaking. That is very complicated to do, but I really appreciate that philosophy that we bring to that program.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think that's definitely what makes our school special. One other thing I did want to say is that upon approval, the plan is to also post these policies so that they're more accessible to families and students, and then sharing them more directly with students. so that they can go back to these policies themselves. And the same with parents, new parents, you know, and parents coming into the high school as well. I meant to mention that.
Awesome. Thank you for your help with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mbang? There. I can't see online.
Katie, do we need to vote to adopt this policy or what?
Oh, yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Yes, I was.
Reminder.
Thank you.
Yeah, and part of the requirement for IB also is the updated job description for the head of school, because the job description I had was the one in 12 years ago maybe that made me of a head of school and principal, and we had only another building K2, so I need to update it to reflect what we have now, and that's something we will share with IB plus our organizational chart.
And I will say, when I saw a job description, it gave me a little bit of a heart attack immediately. I'm like, why do we need a job description? So, but yes, it's part of the process, and we do need a motion to approve the revised IB policy.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Yes.
We've already started our meetings as we announced at the beginning of the school year. One of our 4 priorities this year is the student and staff safety and well-being, and we put in place a district-wide committee that meets once a month. At the same time, at building level, each building will take into account their own, review their own safety measures and look at well-being for students and teachers and report to the big committee. And they do it through their building leadership team, which every building has a building leadership team composed of principal, vice principal, teachers, the nurse, and the social worker or counselor. So what we discussed is reviewing our emergency plan, but to do so, Heather and Megan are working with Missouri School Board Association Center for Education Safety to help us update our district level emergency plan. We've also talked about safety with regard to intercom systems that do not work well in our old buildings. Like at Oak, we don't have one. We use the phone, just like at Cherry. At Armour, the 4th floor is not working, so we need to see how to fix those systems and update the alarms, and then the missing phones for few classes in elementary school. We've also talked about inspecting and considering using the metal detectors at Armour. If you remember a few years ago, I think a couple of years ago, the then board chair talked about proposed using our metal detector, so we did not move forward to about that. But as we're moving forward and what's happening around the country, when we bought the building, again, just to remind you that when we bought the building, the building came with some metal detector already. They're there in the basement. We have never used them. So we're thinking of going and inspecting them and seeing how we're going to use them. I don't know when. Before we do it, of course, parents and the community will be informed. And we'll have a discussion also on our conseil d'école. We're looking into using the Raptor system for visitors identification. It will help us easily identify anybody coming to the building with their ID cards. And the training of teachers for safety issues to make sure that everybody's on board and everybody's respecting what the emergency measures we put in place. So as I said, the building leadership teams are reviewing and addressing safety issues on a monthly basis at the building level. So I think that's it. What else do we have there? I think it's the last spot.
Yes, I think last thing, one, I realized we forgot to remind people about the vector trainings that are coming. The deadline is coming up soon.
Yeah, you've seen emails from me, and I'll get a report probably tomorrow on who's taken what. So I'll nudge those who haven't taken.
And deadline is coming up at the end of this month.
November 1st.
Okay, yes. So make sure, take a look. Those are online trainings you can do at your convenience, but it is important every year. It's a requirement for us all to complete that. The second thing, I'm working to follow up with the Charter Association. They haven't done legislative updates lately. I think there's one key piece of legislation that I wanted to follow up on to see where, if they're still sort of trying to move it forward. You all will remember in the spring, they tried to vote in the Missouri legislature to around critical race theory. Anytime you discuss race or racism in the classroom, that would be illegal. I don't know where that vote stands, but obviously as a board, it's something we will need to keep a close focus on with the just the importance of diversity and talking about issues with our students. We'll need to see where that is. So I'll let you know what I find out about what the plan is for that legislation and any other legislation that we might need to know about as a board. And then the only other thing I realized, when parents come talk at the board meeting, I typically am the one who follows up and just sort of tries to get their questions answered. But I don't keep you all in the loop, so I'll try to just sort of share updates when I provide information to people who speak at the board, so everybody knows where those things stand. So, any thoughts on what you would like to see about parent speakers or anything else that the board would want to know? Okay. So I think that concludes our meeting. We do have some closed session items, so we can go ahead and dismiss everybody. Hi, Pam. We can dismiss everybody from the meeting. We will need a motion to go into closed session to discuss legal matters. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All right, everyone, and right, yes. I'm gonna do a roll call vote. I can't, or here, I'm gonna stop sharing because I actually can't see who we have. And if we could go off of YouTube Live while we do the roll call. Gwen.
Yes.
TJ.
Present.
Lauren.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
And Marvin, are you still on? Nope. Roll call, Jen.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
Beth, yes. Okay.